Hello, this is Guy Wallace. The following is part 2 of a 3-part audio podcast series created by Google's Notebook LM based on a document from my ISPI Presidential Initiative to Clarify HPT, Human Performance Technology, a society-wide effort from 2002 through 2004. That effort failed in its implementation, from my perspective, due to organizational politics, in that the paid leadership of ISPI at the time was resistant during the effort to conduct Stage 1 analysis and design, and then, to put it in polite terms, under-supported in the Stage 2 implementation efforts. A recent series of conversations that I've had with Josh Cavalier in late 2025 and early 2026 about his efforts to build an open source AI skill set for performance consultants to use end-to-end in their efforts, and his agreement that performance improvement, or human performance improvement, requires a collaborative effort across many disciplines. That has given me hope that what the late Geary Rummler and I envisioned and agreed to work toward back in 2002 may finally be realized. My intent on starting the Presidential Initiative to Clarify HPT 2 presidential terms before I became president of ISPI was to see the concept of technology domains to define human performance technology. Geary Rummler had posed that in the ISPI Journal article way back in 1983. I'd like to see that brought back to life. Thanks to ISPI Presidents Judy Hale and Jim Hill, who allowed me to start this effort during their terms of presidential roles before I took the reins, it was a society-wide, multi-year collaborative effort. The documentation is housed on a website I created a number of years ago to ensure that the outputs produced were not shelved, buried, or lost, because, as they say, hope springs eternal. Again, this is part 2 of 3 parts of audio podcasts and videos to share the thinking and outputs produced over 20 years ago in the hopes that what open source AI toolset Josh Cavalier brings to the performance improvement consulting community bears fruit and brings value for all who use it.
Welcome to the deep dive. If you have ever sat in a meeting, looked around at a stalled project, and just wondered why highly capable people are suddenly failing to get anything done, you are definitely in the right place.
Oh, absolutely. It is such an incredibly common workplace frustration.
Right.
Yeah, we constantly demand better outcomes from our teams, but we rarely step back to audit the invisible systems that either propel those outcomes forward or just quietly crush them.
Crush them, exactly. And today we are opening up a literal blueprint for that invisible architecture. We're analyzing a highly detailed, sweeping internal document from March 21st, 2004. It is the ISPI, the International Society for Performance Improvement, their Presidential Initiative Task Force final report.
Which is really a monumental piece of professional history. This was a synchronized effort to define the boundaries and the actual mechanics of a field called human performance technology.
Or HPT.
Right, HPT. It brought together this absolute brain trust of experts across 2 major think tanks. They met in Las Vegas in late 2003, and then again in Oakland in early 2004, just to hammer out a universal standard for this.
And it was over 20 specialists gathered for this. And what really stands out in the document is that they were doing this pro bono.
Yeah, paying their own travel expenses and everything.
Just to establish this framework. So our mission today for you listening is to distill this massive 2004 blueprint, extract the core framework for human performance technology, and understand how they mapped the DNA of a functional organization. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really grasp what the task force accomplished here, we have to look at how they radically redefine the entire concept of performance.
Right.
The text explicitly labels human performance technology as the multiplier factor for performance improvement.
The multiplier factor.
Yes. They were making a very specific argument. HPT isn't just some secondary HR initiative. It is the fundamental lever that scales a business's success.
I really noticed the precision in their language there, too. They define HPT as an integrated systems approach to improving human performance. But the definition of human performance itself was what caught my attention.
It's very specific.
It is. They don't measure it by hours logged or emails sent or whatever. They define it strictly as those valued results produced by people working within a system.
What's fascinating here is the set of underlying assumptions they laid out to actually justify that perspective.
Yeah.
They clarify that in this context, technology does not mean software or hardware.
Right. It's not about computers.
Exactly. A technology is defined as a set of applied scientific and empirical principles. It's a systematic, repeatable way of diagnosing and solving problems.
Wait, so if they view the entire organization as an applied science, does that mean they consider every single routine or habit to be part of that technology?
Yes, essentially.
Because the document states that all organizational processes impact the production of valued results. So are they arguing that even an unwritten rule about, say, who is allowed to speak up in a meeting is technically a process impacting the bottom line?
They absolutely are. And I mean, that is one of the most profound takeaways from this report. It shatters the illusion that a workplace has neutral variables.
Nothing is neutral.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Every policy, the layout of the office, the informal communication channels, whether those factors are formally measured or completely ignored, they are all either adding to the valued results or actively detracting from them.
Wow.
And the task force anchors this by stating that the ultimate purpose of any organization is to create value for its stakeholders. You only achieve that by aligning every visible and invisible process toward that value.
But to keep practitioners from just going off the rails with this, they established 4 pretty rigid criteria to evaluate any HPT application, right?
Hit it.
It has to focus on measured results. It must account for the larger system context. It requires valid, reliable measures of effectiveness, and it has to be grounded in prior research or evidence.
Though they did leave a sort of pragmatic window open on that 4th rule, the text notes that intuition and respected practice are allowed, provided they meet the first 3 criteria.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and as long as no existing research proves the intervention will fail under those specific conditions, they recognize that sometimes you just have to innovate before the academic studies can catch up.
That makes total sense. And I want you to think about your own workplace for a second here. When a quarterly goal is missed, what is the immediate reflex? Usually leadership looks for an individual to blame, or they mandate more training.
Oh, always more training.
Always. But this document suggests that poor performance is almost always a symptom of a broken system. The 2004 task force essentially wrote the diagnostic manual for fixing the environment itself.
And that introduces the first major component of the framework, the performance systems engineering approach.
The engineering approach.
Right. This is the operational methodology used to step into a chaotic organization and systematically untangle the mess.
The source outlines a 6-step method for this. But looking at it, this isn't just a basic checklist. It requires serious alignment with the client. Let's ground this in a scenario. Say a company's new software rollout is completely failing and adoption is practically 0.
A classic problem.
Right. If a practitioner uses this framework, they don't just start building software tutorials.
No, because step 1 is identify and review the issue with the client. In your scenario, the practitioner and the leadership team have to agree on what evidence will prove the issue is resolved and how fixing it actually increases stakeholder value.
So if they can't connect software adoption to broader business value, the project just stops there.
It stops right there. Assuming there is value, they move to step 2, which is assess performance against expected results. They gather the baseline data.
Getting the lay of the land.
Exactly. But step 3 and 4 are where the real diagnostic work happens. Step 3 is identify requirements for success, which basically means locating the exact systemic barriers.
Finding out what's really blocking people.
Yes. And step 4 is recommend solutions, where they evaluate assumptions, costs, risks, and alternatives based on those strict criteria we discussed earlier.
And notice the restraint there. The solution to low software adoption might not be training at all. Step 3 might reveal that the software actually conflicts with the employee's incentive structure.
Precisely. Recommending solutions means addressing the incentive misalignment, not just throwing a tutorial video at the staff and hoping for the best.
So once the solution is approved, we hit step 5, design and implement. You build the rollout plan. And finally, step 6, monitor performance against expected results. You review the data, ask what lessons were learned, and determine if the issue is actually closed.
However, the task force included a critical warning next to this model. They explicitly state the performance systems engineering approach is not linear, even though it appears so in this depiction.
It's not linear.
Right. You don't just march from step 1 to 6 and leave. The diagram features a continuous arrow representing an ongoing relationship and partnership with the business. It is a cyclical, iterative process.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To actually uncover those barriers in step 3, to figure out why the software is failing or why a team is underperforming, you need a way to map the organization. And that brings us to the second and arguably most crucial part of the framework, the Performance Analysis Design Systems Matrix.
It really is the absolute core of the document. If human performance is defined by people acting within a system, analysts need a comprehensive way to track the thousands of variables interacting in that system at any given moment.
The document lays out 4 ground rules for this matrix. It had to be inclusive enough for any industry, comprehensive enough to classify every variable, systemic to show interdependencies, and parsimonious.
Parsimonious.
Yeah, parsimonious is an interesting choice of word there. They actively wanted to avoid redundancy, so this didn't become a bloated bureaucratic nightmare. They deliberately mapped variables only once, placing them at the level where they exert the greatest systemic impact.
Think of this matrix not as a corporate spreadsheet, but as the diagnostic computer you plug into a complex car engine. The rows of the matrix represent the different subsystems of the engine.
Okay, break those down for us.
Sure. You have the organizational system at the top row, looking at executive governance and strategy. Below that is the operational system, which maps the actual value chain and workflow. Finally, you have the performer system, focusing on the individual worker's skills, motivation, and immediate environment.
And the columns represent how fuel and data move through those subsystems. You have the receiving system, which is the stakeholders. You have outcomes, which is what is produced. You have process, the sequence of activities. Input, which is whatever initiates the work. Feedback, the data returning to correct the system. And conditions, the broader physical and cultural environment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, mapping a company across this grid prevents leadership from resorting to simple band-aids for complex failures. Going back to your software adoption example, if the problem stems from a broken operational input, no amount of motivational seminars at the performer level will fix it. The matrix forces you to locate the exact intersection where the system is failing.
The actual questions, the specific probes the task force designed for these intersections are incredibly revealing. Let's look at a few, because they highlight dysfunctions we see all the time.
Let's do it.
At the organizational level, under the conditions column, the analyst is prompted to ask, is decision authority allocated at the right level and the right function?
Oh, that probe alone can diagnose months of stalled projects. If a mid-level manager has to seek executive approval for a routine $20 software license, the organizational condition is actively creating a bottleneck. The system is designed to be slow.
Exactly. Or look at the operational row under the input column. The matrix asks, is the workload sufficiently predictable so that people can respond to it successfully, or are plans in place for dealing with the unpredictable changes?
That is such a crucial question.
I feel like modern workplaces often treat unpredictability as a badge of honor, like it proves how agile they are. But this 2004 document flags unpredictable workloads without contingency plans as a fundamental system failure.
Because it is a failure. If the inputs are chaotic, the performer's output will inevitably degrade. It doesn't matter how resilient your staff is, a chaotic operational input will eventually break them.
It really will.
And speaking of the staff, when we look down at the performer level, under the process column, the probes address autonomy directly. It asks, are people encouraged to take initiative? And do they clearly know when it is appropriate to take initiative and when it is not?
That ambiguity is such a hidden drain on productivity. If you don't explicitly map out where an employee has the runway to be proactive, they will default to waiting for instructions, which just slows the entire value chain down.
Totally.
And the matrix doesn't shy away from compensation either.
Yeah, it integrates it seamlessly. Under the receiving system column, it doesn't just look at external customers. It looks at the employees themselves as receivers of the system's output.
That's a great flip.
It prompts the analyst to ask, do employees receive what they see as adequate money and benefits for their performance? Are they satisfied with job security? It frames employee satisfaction not as a soft HR metric, but as a critical, measurable system output that dictates future performance.
It is an incredibly rigorous way to view an enterprise. But the authors of the report understood a fundamental truth. A brilliant diagnostic matrix is useless if practitioners are siloed in their own departments, entirely unaware of how their specific skills fit into the larger grid.
Which leads to the third major pillar of the task force's framework.
Right. The 7 HPT professional communities.
They realized that to sustain this technology, professionals needed what the document calls a homeroom. They needed structured environments to hang out, share peer-reviewed interventions, debate methodologies, and push the science forward.
A safe harbor for the practitioners.
Exactly. But more importantly, HPT was designed to be an integrator. Before this, you had brilliant specialists who rarely spoke the same language.
The breakdown of the communities in the text illustrates that perfectly. It proves that improving organizational performance requires a massive, diverse coalition, not just one type of consultant.
Let's look at how they group the expertise, because it shows the sheer diversity of the field. First, you have the foundational and analytical minds. This includes the science of HPT community, your researchers and cognitive scientists, and the analysis, evaluation, and measurement community.
The data people.
Right. This is where you find the psychometricians focused on ROI and balanced scorecards. These are the specialists doing the heavy quantitative lifting, building reliable, statistically valid assessments to actually measure human behavior without bias.
Then you transition into the practitioners building the actual interventions. You have the instructional systems community, home to the instructional designers building e-learning and job aids. But right next to them is the process improvement community. This is entirely focused on the efficiency of the value chain, heavily populated by Six Sigma Green and Master Black Belts, the folks dedicated to systematically driving defects out of a process.
And finally, you have the groups managing alignment and motivation. The organizational design and alignment community brings in your OD practitioners looking at culture change. The management of organizational performance community is for the line managers handling succession management.
And the last one.
And the motivation, incentives, and feedback community houses the coaches looking at corrective feedback and performance appraisal.
Reading through that list, it is striking how ambitious this was. They were attempting to build a unified theory of workplace performance, and they were smart enough to know they couldn't do it in isolation. The report explicitly lists partner organizations for these communities.
They didn't want to operate in a vacuum.
No, they wanted to collaborate with the American Psychological Association for Behavioral Science and the American Society for Quality for Process Improvement. They were actively building bridges to other disciplines.
But drawing up a matrix and defining 7 communities during a think tank is just the theoretical part. To prevent this from becoming just another dusty report abandoned on a corporate intranet, the task force had to design a rigid governance structure to put this massive framework into action.
The governance and implementation sections outline a very serious hierarchy. You have the ISPI Board of Directors at the top, but they proposed a new entity called the HPT Advisory Council. Their mandate was to be the ultimate stewards of the technology, ensuring the definitions and strict criteria didn't get watered down over the years.
Beneath them are the professional community councils, elected by the members to manage peer reviews and define the state-of-the-art practices. And crucially, they introduced special interest groups, or SIGs.
I liked that part.
Yeah, these were designed to be highly adaptable. They can come and go based on need. If a specific industry, like military applications, for example, needed to rapidly apply the HPT framework, a SIG could spin up, utilize standardized templates, and tackle the problem without getting bogged down in permanent bureaucracy.
The logistical execution detailed in the appendices of the 2004 rollout is wild. You look at the timeline from early 2004, and there were hard deadlines. The Oakland think tank concluded on March 15th. They had over 20 experts working for free to synthesize the framework, draft reports, and finalize everything by March 20th.
That turnaround is insane.
Right. At the same time, they distributed the draft to 900 certified performance technologists for comment.
The sheer velocity of that consensus building is remarkable. In 2004, before the ubiquity of collaborative cloud documents, synthesizing the feedback of 900 specialists into a unified systemic framework in a matter of weeks was a massive logistical feat.
Unbelievable.
It highlights the urgency they felt to standardize the profession before presenting it at their massive annual conference that April.
So, what does this all mean? We have tracked this from a philosophical redefinition of performance through a nonlinear engineering method into a massive diagnostic matrix, and finally into the communities that govern it. When you synthesize this 2004 blueprint, what is the core takeaway for someone navigating a modern organization today?
The central thesis is that true performance improvement isn't magic. It is an engineering discipline. When an organization stagnates, the default response is often to demand harder work or launch vague cultural initiatives.
Pizza parties.
Exactly, pizza parties. But this task force proved that if you rigorously map the exact inputs, processes, and feedback loops across every single level of the enterprise, you eliminate the guesswork. You stop guessing and start multiplying value.
It requires a complete paradigm shift. You have to stop trying to fix the people and start engineering the environment so that people cannot help but succeed.
This raises an important question, though.
Oh.
The source document stated a really powerful assumption. Everything that an organization does affects what it accomplishes, whether or not the results are acknowledged.
Whether or not they are acknowledged. That is heavy.
It really is.
And it brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you, our listener, to mull over on your own. Look at your own daily workflow today. What is a completely unacknowledged, unmeasured process or habit in your environment that is quietly, invisibly dictating the results you are getting?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is the ultimate diagnostic test. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the foundations of human performance technology. Keep examining the systems operating invisible around you. Keep asking the hard questions, and we will see you on the next deep dive.